How many of you have ever held a secret for yourself or for someone else? By a show of hands. And how many of you wish you could tell that secret with no judgment and no paying for it? By a show of hands. Yeah, if you raised your hand and your partner is here, you're on your own, because now you have to tell them, right? So I want to take you back 3 generations, where my great-grandmother, as soon as she was of age, she hit puberty, she was married off. And her daughter, as soon as she hit 13, she was married off. And I just listened to one of the most inspirational women to me, Terry Rai, who used this analogy of being in a relay where we're all passing on this baton. And these women in my lives were all passing on this baton of early marriage, of illiteracy, of poverty. That wasn't their choice, but it was the race they were given. Then here comes my mother. She's given the same baton. And at 14, before she hit that age, she knew her fate. So she decided to run off before this time came. Her and her cousin took off to a big city and tried to start a new race for herself. But her dad and her stepmother needed her because she was their ticket to get another cow or another goat. So they come up with a plan to get her back in the village so she can deliver, because that is what girls and women were for. Not educated, of course. They make up this plan, and she travels because she has to be respectful. And on her way there, they literally would throw a lasso around a girl. And once that's around you, you're already married off. Tag, you're it. And the rules were you're supposed to now go stay in this house. The transaction takes place, and then you get to meet your husband, who's much older, you've never met. And when they took my mom to this house, she decided to change her race and to not take that baton of early marriage. So she got up and sat outside in a courtyard and started singing on top of her lungs. And they thought she had lost it. And because of her stubbornness, she was not marriage material anymore. They were not going to marry off this stubborn woman. And so they sent her back home because she was not good enough for this. And that's when she changed her race. She had 5 kids and hands us a baton of an education. She changes our future because she knew this had to end with her. But one thing that was kept going on is the silence around it. So here I am as a middle child of 5. I get sexually abused at the age of 11. And the baton of silence was still with me. So I don't tell anyone. Same way my mom never told us about her history. She tragically died in 2010 in a car accident. And I find out all about this just this last summer when I started talking about my own stuff. 2015, I traveled to Uganda as a therapist. I didn't do my own work because I can just heal everybody else. And as a result, I'm good. I got the resources. I can do this on my own. I don't need anybody else. And as we're talking about mental health and trauma, what are some of the things I can do in this village? They tell me about this 9-year-old in class who had been assaulted the day before. And she was in class the next day like nothing happened. And it turns out, in this village, the perpetrator just gives a goat to a parent as an apology. And to me, that was a message of telling these girls, you are worth a goat. And that was not okay. So we did our work with this girl, and literally a week later, another 5-year-old who heard about what I had done, her grandmother came and said her daughter had been raped by her grandfather, who was HIV positive. And because they couldn't come up with $5 in the 72-hour span, she couldn't get that pill that could change her life. And it was like looking in a mirror of helping these girls and hearing the 11-year-old in me screaming, what about me? Either you think they deserve more than you do, or you're being a hypocrite because the work is hard. And the voice was clear. I thought I was just too busy. Once I finished my doctorate, I have 4 kids, I have this and that. I can come back and do this work. But the voice was clear. Why do you get the luxury to wait when they're hurting now? So that's how I started my foundation. And I realized we all carry batons that we didn't ask for, but we have not stopped to wonder, what are we carrying? Generations before maybe have passed on batons of hate for those who don't look like you. Political affiliation that you never questioned. How does this affect my community? There's a lot of silence around important issues that we take for granted. Did we ever consider why they tell us not to talk about our salaries at work? Because that keeps women underpaid and men paid. You could be the first man to say, this is what I'm getting paid. What are you getting paid? Let's do something about that. They've told us to be quiet about religion and politics. Why is that? That's what got us where we are now. We don't know how to have these difficult dialogues. Now it's time to look at the batons we've been passing on. A story is told of a little girl watching her mother making turkey and baking it, whatever they do with turkeys. You can tell I don't cook. And so she would cut off the legs and the wings before baking it. And the little girl said, why do you do that? And mom looks up and says, I actually don't know. My mom always did it that way. Let's ask mom, why did you do that, grandma? I don't know, my mom did it that way. 3 generations later, great-grandma did not have a big enough pot. And so all these other generations were throwing away really good meat. Because of traditions, we didn't stop to question, why do we do what we do? It served a purpose then, it doesn't now. How often do we stop and question the things we think and believe, especially when they oppress other people? It is up to us to create a next generation that will have to Google what racism is, that will not understand what sexism you're talking about was. LGBT community that will not know what a closet is, because everybody is welcome, open, and we can have the difficult dialogue with respect and love for the other. What is the baton you're holding and about to pass on without looking, analyzing, so we can realize a better future? And so this analogy that I love the most is from a Japanese culture of pottery, where when it breaks, they fix it with gold. All the cracks are fixed with gold. And to me is an analogy of the wound is where the light comes in, and all the cracks in our lives have been a part of our history. We hold the power to patch them up with gold for one another and for ourselves. How are you going to open space for the next person so that we do not have to pass a baton of suffering, of trauma? As she said, trauma not transformed is trauma transferred. It might not have started with us, but it can end with us. And we have to start with ourselves. What are you going to do and pass on for the next generation? Because for me, I want my daughters to not have to do this work. Even as I speak up here and talk about my own stuff, I can feel my ancestry, my whole country just gasping. How would you say that in public? Now everybody knows your stuff. But I know my girl Brené Brown would be proud. So it is up to all of us to create a future of healing, to be the gold that patches the society in the next generation. Thank you.